Today's Cities Skylines 2 episode is all about getting some big infrastructure in to support the city's growth. I have a pretty good idea what I want the highway network to look like on this map. So I'm going to branch off west from the main highway and run a major road along this coast. I'll create a simple intersection to connect it to the main arterial network, and where I plan to branch off from the existing highway, I'm going to create a big interchange, and I'm going to be joining this big freeway hybrid Parclo stack thing, and we're going to connect it seamlessly into a smaller service interchange, and we should be able to get traffic on and off the arterial roads pretty well with that, and that's mostly going to be serving the industrial area as it gets busier later down the line. Before I get started on all of that, I'd like to expand the arterial grid and get ready for connecting the area south of the build. I'm going to pick a height and flatten the area on either side of the water so we can get a nice level bridge here. Let's gently slope up from the existing road, and I'll try and get a gradual slope up to that build area as well. With that in place, I might introduce a bit of height on the other side of this road to give an impression that the land was cut out to accommodate that section. I think that could look pretty nice, and that's the kind of thing you'd probably see in real life, isn't it? Here's a quick overview shot. You get a pretty clear idea of what we're looking to do and bringing it over the river. So future expansion, we've got it in place, we're good to go, and we can revisit this at some point when we're looking to expand south. As I said earlier, I've got a pretty good idea where I want the highway to run, so let's get the tiles unlocked that I'll need. For this section, I want something of a sunken highway. I'm going to be drawing in a dirt road first, and I'll make sure I'm happy with the rough outline of where I want it to go before we start dropping the elevation. So I'm going to create something of a ditch here to build the highway in. I'm not going to worry too much about the rest of the surrounding ground here. I just want the main road in first before we're going to be worrying about any of the detail. That'll all come later down the line. I know that I want to keep the arterial grid in place as best as I can, so I'll look to extend over the highway. This is a tricky one to do with the angles which the roads were overlapping. I wanted to avoid spacing out the highway just to accommodate the pillars, you know, on the bridge. So with that anarchy on, I've just gone ahead and just built directly on the road, and I'll show you how to remove these pillars in a minute. I think that looks like a pretty nice orientation for the roads, doesn't it? I think that looks decent. I'm going to run with that. In the last episode, I covered how to remove objects from an asset. So again, it's just a case of getting into dev mode. Under simulation, you'll need to select debug toggle, go to UI binding, and then select the object you want to delete. So here, we're selecting the pillars. You just click delete within the dev menu, and that's pretty much it for the bridge section. Before I get this bridge connected to the highway with a little service interchange, I want to get the rail line in place. I know that I want to run it fairly close to the highway here. So first thing to do is to pick an appropriate height to bridge it over, that 6-lane road, and we'll give it a gentle slope back down. A little bit of terraforming is required to tidy this up a little bit. Yeah, and I think that'll do nicely as a starting point. Introducing different heights certainly makes this section a little bit more interesting, and that view over the highway and down towards the starting suburbs is looking pretty good, I think. Now with that in place, I'll run the rail back north and bring it over the highway a little bit closer to that intersection. I'll give it a nice big smooth curve in, and we'll come back and we'll hook it into the network later on. I did originally plan to run a simple diamond intersection here, but the angles of the main road coupled with the adjacent railway line close by meant that the ramps were looking really bad, so that idea gets shelved. I've gone with a version of a B2 Parclo for now. Primary reason for that was really just the lack of space to get adequate ramps in place, you know, for an A2. I'll need to keep an eye on this one. I'll need to make sure it doesn't get overwhelmed. I'll also need to be making sure that there's sufficient service interchanges nearby and give plenty of options coming off. So a little bit worried about this one. Definitely need to keep an eye on it, especially as I'll be looking to add a little bit higher density along the coast here. So an extra ramp to make it a B4 Parclo would probably be an obvious upgrade choice if it's needed. I just need to figure out how to make the ramps look decent if I go down that route. So let's apply a little maths here and bump the lane count down to 2 between the ramps. Before moving on to the big interchange, I want to expand the highway south, and I want to bring it over down at least to that next arterial over the highway. So let's have a look here. I think you can get an idea of what I'm trying to do here. The highway is more of a freehand design that's going to be weaving through the map. and we'll connect it where and when it collides with the arterial network. Now, there'll be a few exceptions to that as we go along, but that's the pretty basic idea of the major road hierarchy here. For the big service interchange to the north, I've based that on a real life interchange south of Orlando, Florida. I'm not necessarily going for a one-on-one recreation, but we'll get kind of close. One obvious adjustment I'll be making here is to the northbound traffic turning west. So currently there's no route to join that traffic on the current real life interchange. I'm going to add an overpass and we'll complete the interchange given options to go in any direction from all approaches. Once we have this system interchange dealing with highway to highway traffic built, I'm going to create a simple A4 Parclo directly south to the main build, and that will give us access to the arterial. Going to stick a few slip roads in, joining the two interchanges together. Gives that impression of one big interchange, and it'll also keep a little bit of traffic off the main highways, keep them off the weaving sections as well, which is a bonus. Although I'm going to show you every step of the build, I can't give exact measurements for this one like I would do in my interchange tutorials. Obviously there's plenty of tutorials on there, I think there's more than 20 now, so if you need a wee bit of assistance step by step, they're on there on a separate playlist. But the main highway here is going to curve, and drawing the ramps in at different angles means that it's almost impossible to build along and create an exact copy. That said, you can definitely build along. The steps here are straightforward enough, but it'll require a little bit of trial and error on your part, and that's fine. Just a little bit of learning and figuring things out. Building interchanges like this can often require quite a few versions and a lot of adjustments, as you hone down the angles and the curves and the overall look of the build. So do experiment, have a play about, and see what you guys come up with. So with this build, once we have the bridge sections in place, I'll usually start on the loops, get them in first. Once I've terraformed a uniform slope up, I'll just use the semicircle functionality with the continuous curve tool, and it's just a case of finishing each one with the simple curve tool. The curve sizes on the real ones are quite different, they do vary quite a bit. I guess the bigger the curve, the quicker the traffic can go. It's not really a consideration in this game, obviously. But I generally prefer to keep my loops pretty much the same, I think it does look better, but it's personal preference there, I guess. Once the first direct turn's in place, along with the loops, I'll get the first big overpass in. So this one's going to go over the sunken road, and then it's go under the elevated road. The road tools make things a lot easier here, as we can just use the flatten tool to give us that big curve, then convert the higher elevation road to a bridge with the elevated road tool. At this point, I just want to get the roads in a rough place so I can check the curvature and the change of elevations. We'll want to get them all nice and smooth, but they'll rarely go in like that, at the first time of trying. So it's just about getting them in, getting them functional, and then we can finesse the look of it later on. If you're enjoying the video, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, really helps. Thanks very much. Right, let's get a few more of these ramps connected. Okay then, so that's functional now. It might not be pretty, but it will work. We'll still need to complete it with the final overpass, but just now I want to get that service interchange in place so we can shift traffic onto that arterial onto the highway and vice versa. Tend to mark out distances when creating an underpass like this. I certainly prefer the elevation changes to be uniform in each direction, especially if the road is straight. It's just a case of creating a few markers, a flat section at the bottom, and then sloping it out to the main road. Once that's done, you can just draw the road straight back in. So let's get this Parclo wrapped up then. So with the simple A4 Parclo in place, I'll get an additional slip road in. This will allow the traffic on each side looking to make 2 right turns on the interchanges. It'll give them a dedicated lane and they can avoid having to go on the main highway. Pretty handy, it just eliminates a certain percentage of traffic. As I said earlier on, it's just less traffic on your weaving sections, can help a little bit with congestion on that stretch of the road. So wrapping this up, you can tell that most of the big stuff is done on this one. You can clearly see where everything will be in its place, and as a rough throw together at this point, that's not a bad effort. The final piece of the jigsaw here is to connect the overpass, connect the northbound traffic to the westbound traffic. So remember guys, if you struggle to do overpasses, I've got a tutorial pretty much specifically on how to upgrade existing interchanges. Most of the focus on that video is how to get good looking overpasses created, so do check it out if you're struggling. And that applies to anything you see here. There's loads of step-by-step instructions on those videos if you need a bit of help. Okay, so in terms of the actual road part of it, it's just a case of finessing the curves, and we'll apply a bit of lane maths here and there to help the traffic flow. I'm going to do a reasonable bit of detailing on here as well. We'll be taking advantage of dev mode, and yeah, we'll try and make it look a little bit better. We're going to use plenty of rocks, a little bit of vegetation. We're going to use some of the traffic assets as well, so that'll be maybe a couple of cones, some barriers, and we'll give this intersection a little bit of character, I guess, is what we're going to be doing. So yeah, I'll crack on with that. I'll stick this on a wee time lapse and I'll catch up with you in a few minutes. Alright troops, let's have a quick review of what we've done here. So over towards the coast and the future tourist area, we've got some parallel networks running at different heights. The rail is over the arterial road and the arterial road's over the highway, and creating these layers of network certainly helps create a bit of interest in the structures, and it's always worth taking a bit of extra time to make sure everything's looking tidy. These things usually stay in your city forever, so they're definitely worth the investment. Using the key wall functionality and the road tools along with the smoothing tool, we can get a nice smooth ramped effect leading up to the railway bridge, and there'll be a fair bit of development here, so detailing will be for another day, and then we can make some appropriate detailing choices once we have a bit of development in. That simple service interchange is looking like a good fit. The curves are smooth and the elevation of the ramps running down to the highway are looking reasonable too. Let's have a look at the major interchange work now. I've mirrored the detailing on both of the interchanges here along the connecting bypass roads. It just helps to reinforce that I want this to appear as a single system. I've used the dev mode to manually place additional safety barriers, and we're using the key wall functionality again to get an additional barrier effect. For the loops, I've just used a single tree species, giving the impression that they're all planted en masse at the same time. The stones, the boulders, the rubble objects from dev mode make a nice landscaping effect as well. One thing that didn't make the build was some additional textures. At the time of the recording, the game's updating to PDX mods, so I couldn't get them running, but I'll definitely look to come back and add these a little bits of additional interest off camera. You can clearly see the difference between the rough build and the final build now in terms of the smoothness of the curvature with the ramps and the overpasses. It's just a matter of trial and error. If it doesn't look too hot first time, it's not a problem. Just delete it, rebuild it, and go figure out those angles. As you probably imagine if you've seen any of my other stuff, I've enjoyed doing this one. Feels good to get some big infrastructure in, and it feels like I can really start expanding the city and add some density now without worrying too much about the traffic. If you've enjoyed yourself folks, I've got another couple of videos lined up for you. Check them out. Thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate you all.